Hello and welcome to the Clyde FC Podcast Live, brought to you by A State of Mind. My name is Paul Shanks, and as always, this Friday evening, I have my right-hand man, John Boyce. Boyce, how you doing?
Aye, not too bad, Paul. Ready for Christmas.
Well, and I'm delighted to say that in our fan guest slot this week, we have the man that has had more roles at Clyde than Greg's normally have on a Monday. It's Graham Murray. Graham, how you doing?
I'm not too bad. You make me feel awful old there, Paul, but thanks anyway. Glad to be here. Glad you invited me on, and rest assured I've made sure all the kids are out of the living room so there'll be no kids noise in the background for you guys.
Good man. Now, we've got a couple of things to cover. We also do have another guest this week. I'm delighted to say for the second half of the show, we'll be joined by the Clyde Medical Director, David MacPherson, to discuss, obviously, the ongoing issues that the club face with COVID and just obviously generally making sure that we've got players fit and ready for action every weekend. Now, speaking of action, we did get back on the pitch last week. Unfortunately, not the result we were looking for, gents. A 3-0 defeat to Falkirk. What were your initial kind of reactions after the match, boys?
So I never actually got to watch the game. I've just watched the highlights today. Now, from the highlights and what people have been saying, I don't think the scoreline really reflects, the way we played. We seem to have a lot of chances, good chances, and the negatives, I would probably say that the first goal probably gave them too much time and space on the edge of the box. Again, we've seen that throughout the season. Players are getting time to get their shot away. And I think we really need to stop sitting so deep. Personally, I think we need to be rushing out the box to close these people down. And the offside goal, I think it was a very good cross from Cunningham and a fantastic finish for Goody. Now, for me, I must have paused that about 10 times a day trying to get, Cunningham's foot on the ball and seeing where Goody was. For me, don't think it's offside. But again, it's a close one. I think Goody perfectly timed his run. Graham, what do you think on kind of the performance against Falkirk and the offside goal? Was it or wasn't it?
Well, I'm with you, boys. I didn't think it was offsides. However, just a couple of things that I would politely disagree with you on, and just you mentioned the 3-0 scoreline maybe being a bit unflattering. I thought we played okay last week, but I think some of our chances came after Falkirk were 3-0 up. There's turning points in every single game. You had Connor Salmon kicking the ball out of a goalkeeper's hand when he was on the yellow cards. Might be a bit trivial, but could have changed the game. The offside goal possibly again could have changed the game because the performance wasn't that bad. However, the goals are all very avoidable. You mentioned Cunningham's cross for Goody's header for what looked to be a perfectly good goal, but it's possibly the only cross we put in all game. And when you look at the corners that Falkirk delivered for the second and third goals, I'm not in the blame the goalkeeper camp. I think if you put a good delivery in, like Falkirk continuously did last week, it's going to be dangerous to defend against, and they got their just rewards from a combination of really good delivery and some hesitant defending. But on the first goal, you've actually got a midfielder who was maybe our best right back a couple of years ago, who actually rushed back into the box, and if he'd held his position with the midfielder, then it maybe, instead of rushing out, hold his position, it might have been another story. But it wasn't as bad as it's been in some of the games this season. But we're playing against a good team, and we've got to start getting some confidence. We've got to start picking up some points soon.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Graham. And it did obviously come on the back of two enforced game layoffs, which is hardly preparation when you're against the much fancied, probably title favourites. The crossing that you mentioned, Graham, to me that was a stark contrast from the Falkirk that we saw last year in the games against us. They had a lot of possession in those games, but when they got into the final third, they'd done very, very little with it. It was normally overhit crosses or crosses straight into Mitch's arms. They were certainly better in that regard. The the second and third goals were insanely poor. I think there's no other way of kind of discussing it. The second one in particular, I don't know who it was who kind of slid at the back post, and the third where there was a Clyde body in the deck, and we just teed it up perfectly, and the boys 6 yards out free. So yeah, bitterly disappointing. I don't think the scoreline was overly harsh. I think, Graham, as you mentioned, a lot of the chances did come after. Do you think we maybe just need that break as well? We'll have the David Goodwillie goal being ruled out. If that does stay, it's a different game, as you say.
As I said, you look, it's very fine margins, and I think last season the games against Falkirk in particular, we maybe got a little bit of the rub of the green in some of these games as well. Whereas, Mitch probably was outstanding in all 4 games. I know he never played last week, and he never played in the cup tie, but Vaz has really had nothing to do in both those games. To be fair, so they're different types of games, and it is an improved Falkirk side, but I think as well, just the delivery into the box from the set plays was much more noticeable from what we were looking to defend against last season. And it's something that I feel in a lot of games this season, and I'll even go back to the Airdrie game when it was nothing each. We had some opportunities to get some good balls into the box. Nothing came from it. And then the minute Airdrie got some good delivery in the box, they're scoring from it. So they're fine lines. I'm sure Danny and the boys will be working on these things all the time. If we can start getting some good deliveries from the wide areas, you had one last week. That was a tremendous header from Goody. So if you get the service into him, which arguably he's not been getting, then you could be turning some of these games round about.
Yeah, I think the positive thing for me to see was that when we were on that counter attack, we seemed to get the better of the favourites for the league, if you will.
Yeah.
On the hour mark, we're talking about luck. Now, the ball falls to Tom Lang in a position that maybe you're wanting a Norway or a Goodwillie to have to put it away, and Tom hits it straight at the keeper. And then you've got, again, highlighting that kind of, effortless run from Norway going forward. If not for a fantastic clearance off the line, Cunningham gets a goal back. So, for me, we're creating the chances against a very good Falkirk side. If we continue to play that way, I'm sure we will get the rubbery green eventually. But yeah, definitely see the counter-attacking and kind of that wee nice overlap run that we have for our wingers. And it's good to see that we keep finding our men. So yeah, that's the positive from me.
Yeah, I think another positive, you mentioned obviously Chris Sivertson. I think it was another good performance from Big Norway. Yeah, Graham, what were your thoughts? Did you think he merits a start tomorrow?
I think Norway's a unique one for me, obviously, because he's probably the best player we've got with the ball at his feet. Okay, but he's maybe not. He's bulked up certainly, but the physical side of the game is not for him. And obviously, we're encountering Cove away for the first time, since I think a cup tie a few years back. So it's been a while, and we've got what kind of Norway's going to be there. Is it going to be? Is the ball going to be played on the deck? If Cove allow us to play that way, then I think we'll get some joy from that. He is making strides. Okay, I think we've got our number 9. Okay, I think we're still looking to have a number 10 playing beside him, whether it's Ali, whether it's Norway, whether it's even Ross Cunningham. Then that's where we're looking to get. He's had some chances. He's taken some chances as well, in fairness to him. We've played 6 games, and I think that gets overlooked at some points in time as well. We had an enforced layoff. So you're looking at, I don't think we can be too critical of the players last week based on the fact that we don't know, who had COVID, who was self-isolating. None of us trained. The physical condition of all of them, maybe Mr. MacPherson, he might not be able to name names later on, but he can just talk about the differences in a part-time club and how much of a physical impact that will have on players. So we can't be too harsh. And Boyce is right, we are creating chances against your Falkirks, your Montroses, your Partick Thistles, Kilmarnock, Dunfermline.
Yeah.
We're better against better teams, in my opinion. We just, when you had Mitch on the show, we just need to get down and dirty with the teams that maybe are not up at the top end of the league. So, and to answer your question, I don't know what Norway's going to turn up tomorrow. I expect he will play. But if we can get if we if we're allowed to get that counter-attacking team on the go that Boyce mentioned there as well, I think we might actually, see Norway, breaking his duck for the season.
Yeah, and listen, you've got us fighting until the final whistle as well when you're 3-0 down at home, so that's always nice to see. We also have our first comment of the evening from Nick Troy. Hi, Nick. Just agreeing with what you're saying, Graham. Think given the enforced break and the stop-start season we've had, the result flattered Falkirk. We weren't all that bad, and I think if we get a decent run of games, we will improve. So last week I spoke about a run of games. We've got Cove and then Airdrie, and then after that, Partick Thistle. Now, I think the way we play football, if we can continue creating those chances and having that counter-attacking pressure, if we can show things up at the back, I'm sure we can give those teams a game.
Yeah, and I think that will be key. From the 6 games so far this season, defensively we've faltered. I don't think anyone would disagree with that. We do need to tighten up. We were perhaps slightly fortunate against Montrose, but unlike, say, last week against Falkirk, we took all the chances that we got. I'm expecting probably a similar performance will be required. We don't really know an awful lot about Cove. Boise, I know we're going to come to doing a wee kind of spotlight on tomorrow's opponents. Anything else, though, first, before we move on the Falkirk game? I think we've kind of covered most of the key points from it. A disappointing result, not the worst performance, and plenty to work on.
Yeah, definitely. And I would encourage anyone watching the stream to, put their thoughts in the comments for us to discuss as well. Get involved and have your say. But as you've mentioned, Paul, going to do a wee spotlight on Cove. So they're somewhat of an unknown quantity to maybe some Clyde fans, coming up from the Highland League a couple of years ago. So they absolutely stormed League 2 last year, winning the title. A man who I've kind of followed from the Highland League up, Mitch Megginson, is going to be my danger man for us tomorrow. 24 goals last season in League 2, which, as we know, is a feat in itself. He's kind of like Cove's David Goodwillie. He's the main man that they run through. And I think tomorrow they'll be looking to improve on a run of 4 League 1 matches without victory. They've lost to Dumbarton, Montrose, Airdrie. The Airdrie game was a draw, and they lost to Falkirk. So a fun wee stat, the Montrose game was actually their first league loss at the Balmoral Stadium since they've joined. So that was a 17 game win streak. So that's quite something. So they're obviously good at home. The one thing I will miss going up there is the chippy just outside Cove. Fantastic fish and chips if you ever go up. And yeah, I think they're up at the top of the table, and looking at their results, they've actually had quite a favourable start to the season, with East Fife Peterhead, Forfar and Partick Thistle. So I think they're coming into their wee run of kind of harder games now, especially when they've had that winning mentality from last season and into this season. This is their first kind of blip. So it'll be really interesting to see how they kind of go. And I've said about Mitch Megginson, he might be out tomorrow. He's had a few hamstring injuries in the last couple of weeks, so that would be nice. What are your thoughts on Cove, Graham?
I don't want to wish ill on any player for a start. I would much rather we went up there and beat Cove 5-0 with a full team out. But I remember Megginson playing for Brecon. He was on loan from Aberdeen, and he's scored goals wherever he's went. He's found a home at Cove, as you mentioned, like Goody has at Clyde. But yeah, I think that you're right. There is very much an unknown quantity about them. We don't really know what to expect. They've also got McGrory there as well. So not somebody that we are very familiar with, who has caused us no ends of problems, in getting and converting penalties, for example, so in quite a few occasions. So we know all about the danger that he has, but he might be out as well. So you're right, they've come up with a good attitude from last year, but as we found out ourselves, it's a step up. So they're going to, I don't see them being in any immediate danger of going straight back down, okay, like ourselves, which, as I said, we're still to find out what every team can bring to the table in this division, okay, but I genuinely think that on paper it actually might be a game that suits us, because at home they will try and win the game. They will play possibly a little bit more open, and I think that's where our football intelligence that we have at times, okay, could possibly exploit that. So again, when it's anything up north, okay, the weather might have a part to play in it, okay, but if Clyde can get the ball down and start playing through the midfield rather than round about them, which I think has been a big problem that we've had since possibly, the Dumbarton game, as early on as that, and the Thistle game. We've started to play round about the centre midfield. If we can get the ball through the midfield and get it to guys that can pass the ball, like Cunningham, Norway, as you said, some of the stuff between Norway, Ross Cunningham and Goody this season has been exceptional, okay, and we finished off some of that against Montrose. If we can get that kind of interplay and link up working for us tomorrow, I don't see any reason why we can't get a favourable result.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely. I mean, you've mentioned the midfield. I think two of their main players are Jamie Masson and Fraser Fivey. Now, they're not exactly the most physical of players, shall we say. So again, the game might suit us with that passing style. An interesting wee preview on the website I was looking at from the left-back Harry Milne. So a couple of quotes from that. Clyde are more experienced and streetwise, and playing teams like Clyde is what I'm in the game for. And that's coming from their left-back, who incidentally is playing ahead of Adam Livingston, who Clyde fans will know. So he's not getting a game for them at the moment. So we know how good he was last season. So maybe a wee bit of a precursor there. But for me, I think both teams have created plenty of chances in the last few games, but failed to take any. So for me, it might be that old cliche of whoever takes their chances wins. Could either be 0-0 if both teams continue not to take their chances, or it could be 4 each. I don't know. But if any Clyde fan wants to watch the game, it's live on CRFC TV and it kicks off at 2:30 p.m. So that's the Pixelot system that we have been using, and it's £10. So I'll be tuning in for that one to hopefully see a bully wee win. Paul, what are your thoughts on Cove?
Yeah, so an interesting kind of fact, obviously, with Cove suffering just a first home league defeat since they got promoted to the league structure. Now, interestingly, we're kind of the flip side with our away form. We have very much struggled away from home. I don't think we've won a league match away from home since November last year. Now, granted, there was an 8-month sabbatical due to the COVID pandemic, but even taking that aside, there's still a fair amount of football in that. So that has to come to an end at some time. And if it was to come tomorrow, it could just be the shot in the arm that our season needs.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've had, the win against Thistle and the win against Montrose, and then it's been halted. If we get a win tomorrow and all the games go ahead as planned, then you never know, that could be what we need. And incidentally enough, it came out this afternoon that the Falkirk game is off because of some structural damage to the floodlights. It's a strange one.
I think it's moved to Sunday.
It's moved to Sunday?
Yeah, I think it's now a Sunday kickoff. Okay, so potentially Cove could be looking at closing the gap to Falkirk. So a wee bit of pressure on them, less pressure on us.
That's it. A couple more comments coming in. So one from Fitz. Cove haven't won in the last 4 games, including 3 losses. We've never really got our season going, but I think we've got a good chance given our current form. I think I have to agree. It's probably the best time to play Cove. It's certainly a fixture that I've looked at since they came out and thought it's going to be a difficult one because of their, winning mentality, etc. If they've not won in 4, good time to do it. We need a win. They need a win. Could just be a great game. For me, I would probably take a draw, if I'm being honest. Get something to build a platform on and work towards. But don't know about you boys.
Mr. Positivity, eh?
I'd take it from you. Take it from you.
It's just that I always laugh at that every week when you come in with Mr. Positivity, and I think back to all our group chats about how much of a boo boy you were to some of the players as well, and not a chance of getting away with that.
Roller coaster, we mean that group chat, Graham. Roller coaster.
It's funny. I'm going to bring back to the left back saying how Clyde are very streetwise. I think that's our biggest failing. I think when you look at a team like Peterhead and a manager like Jim McInally, who I think is more accustomed to the league and is more streetwise than Clyde, I think that's our biggest failing. I think we can play a team like Kilmarnock or Dunfermline, a team from a higher division, even a Falkirk, if that's what just came down, and not look out of place. We're not streetwise enough to play the other teams, in my opinion. And so I find that's quite an interesting comment. So I'm going to look at the left back tomorrow when I'm watching the footage and just see, whether he's been tested recently. So we'll find out and see what his thoughts are after the game as well. I would put Ross Cunningham right up against him and just see how we can get any joy from that.
That's it. I've got to agree. Look, it's been a running theme throughout this season and in the podcast, certainly, where we've had that thought. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see. Got a comment from Craig Black, one of our fantastic spotlight guests from the last few weeks. Evening, Craig. Great show again. Thank you. I'd say we're well overdue a good away win, and I think it will come tomorrow. 2-1 away win. We'd love to see it.
Yeah, take that in a heartbeat.
No.
Now, moving on, we obviously do have our fan guest, and we're going to do a wee spotlight on you, Graham. Now, I touched upon, obviously, you've done various different roles at the club in the guise of a volunteer. Can you just kind of go through them? How did you start volunteering and where it's kind of went from there?
I think it started at probably the most difficult time when we just lost Billy Reid as a manager and I started contributing to the programme. I've known one of the club directors, Gordon Thompson, for years. I've been going to Clyde games for over 40 years, okay, but we used to go in the Castlemilk branch and we were the two young ones that didn't get to go to the pub. So the two Gracies, Grace Donald, absolute salt of the earth, okay, and Grace Doherty took us to whatever cafe there was around about the game. So always had a good relationship with Gordon Thompson, and obviously he's progressed and came to the club and now is obviously the vice chairman. But there was an opening he used to do a programme piece, okay, and because he stepped up, I then took over the programme piece, and it was a time where we started off and Colin Hendry was the manager, okay, and then John Brown subsequently took over. So I did the programme piece for maybe about 4 years. It's a piece I think you do just now, Take It As Read. And for the first 2 years, I don't mind telling you, it was a bit difficult to try and get some positivity out when the results maybe weren't going. It was a double relegations. So at that point in time, it was just a case of trying to be as positive and, there's good things coming. And then I was more than happy to comment and do a fairly lengthy programme piece on, Clyde 2, Celtic 1. So that was probably the highlight of the kind of programme piece. I also did a wee bit with the match reports, and on one occasion, and I'm not going to tell you what one it is, so you can go back and see how bad it was. I actually did the footage because Andy was away on holiday, so I actually did the footage of a game at Broadwoods. I think it was Dumbarton we played, but it was a pretty forgettable game, to be fair. But so just volunteered where I could. There was a call to arms by the then chairman, John Alexander, to see if we can get people involved and have their skill sets out there to try and help in whatever way they could do. I was working at the time and had taken advantage as an employee of the business club side of things, and that had fell by the wayside. And I'd kind of made, my thoughts on it known, and obviously I participated in the golf day from time to time as well. So I then got approached to, take over the kind of business club side of things. Don't mind holding my hands up and saying that my personal life and work maybe got in the way to making that as successful as I wanted it to be. Also, another chairman came in after Mr. Alexander, and it wasn't something that there was much dialogue about. But in the interim, we still ran, 2 or 3 very, very successful golf days, okay, with you guys helping out as well. to raise some much needed funds for the club. I then again changed careers on a personal basis, okay, and decided that I was just going to take a step back and help out wherever I could. So in the initial, David Alexander has set up the kind of bar in the pods with the hot dogs and stuff like that. So me and my dad would help out in that. And then it came over in the area lounge, and even the hospitality started coming through. So I then I was then asked to do the kind of hospitality side of things. Okay, so I was a hospitality host. Well, there was some limited options for hospitality, and not accustomed to public speaking. I did my best. Okay, did my best to get through that and to help out wherever I could. Had some good laughs with it. Got to speak to some really good Clyde guests as well. Some of the managers were tremendous. Barry Ferguson probably been the most charming Clyde manager I've ever met in my life, which really would surprise you, okay? But an absolute gentleman of a guy, never had, couldn't do enough for you. Got some of the players up after the games, okay? And bar the last season, it was a pretty good time, to get players up after home games at Broadwoods. But again, stepped aside. In the meantime, my dad had went up to help out in the boardroom and the bar side of things there. And when I stepped away from the kind of hospitality side, my dad took a wee ill turn, okay, and I just decided I was going to help him out as well. I didn't need it, okay, but just thought I'd give him a hand doing the kind of bar work, which again, club 1878 at first, with the execs, okay, and then the boardroom. So just basically whatever I can do to help the club, okay. I'm not looking for a blazer or a title or anything like that as well, just whatever I can do to help, okay. It's important that as many volunteers can get involved, because we are a small club. We don't own a stadium. We're very much reliant on the Clyde boards, they're all Clyde supporters doing their best at a very, very difficult time as it is just now. Everything that's going on in the world, and just if anybody's out there, I'll say it's a kind of call to arms. If anybody's out there that's got some skills out there that wants to help for not any thanks, probably a little bit of criticism, it's unwarranted it sometimes as well, because we're human. But if anybody's out there wanting to help, just get involved. There's nothing better. We're not Clyde supporters, because it's a fashionable thing to do. We're Clyde supporters because we love the club. So that love, if you bring that to them and you can help out in any way, just come along and help out the volunteers, guys.
Here, Graham. Very well put.
Yeah. The hospitality part. I was one of your guests for my birthday a few years ago. Never really thanked you for that signed match ball, so thank you very much for that. It's a great day. But again, great job from a volunteer, and much like you've said, it's just passionate Clyde fans giving up their time, and guys like yourself and Paul and John Anderson got me into it as well for the couple of years I was doing it, and it is really rewarding. Again, you're not looking for any thanks or that. You just do it to help out the club, and it does feel great. So yeah, fantastic.
So obviously you mentioned that you've followed Clyde now for, let's just say, a number of years. I won't go down what the number you said again for your own benefit, mate. Any particular highlights in that time? You'll have seen title wins, you'll have seen relegations, aplenty, sadly too. What stands out for you?
I've seen more than two. I've seen more than two relegations, but listen, I can't. The obvious one, and and it is 40 plus years, okay, but maybe touching on 35 or maybe 30, where football was actually a thing. I don't mind admitting that when I did grow up at Shawfield, okay, but I spent my kind of formative years trying to destroy Shawfield while my dad watched the football. So I just tried to wreck the joint. But when I did I probably started watching the football more when we moved to Firhill, in fairness, okay. So that was 86. So that was hard, okay. Frank McGarvey playing for Clyde and the team, and the title winning team that Alex Smith won, okay. The overhead kick from Craig Ronald at Hampden. The junior revolution was tremendous. The game away to Wraith Rovers, me and my dad were actually a little bit late to that game, and we're walking up that massive slope at Starts Park to try and get into the away stand, and we hear a cheer, and we're like, they've scored already. But we didn't realise it was us until we heard Alex, what's the score? Alex, what's the score? Because Alex Smith was the assistant manager at Wraith Rovers. So you'd never seen two kind of overweight Baldwin Clyde supporters dancing in the streets of Kirkcaldy that day before we'd even paid into the game. But the Celtic game is the obvious one. The Celtic game is the obvious one because in my lifetime, that was just massive, and it comes on the back of we really should have cuffed Rangers as well in the League Cup at Ibrox. It was that season. The fallout wasn't so great, but that actual season, and that game will live with me forever. There's been individual performances. I remember Gary McSwegan in the Alloa playoff game. I don't mind saying that's possibly single-handedly the best individual performance I've ever seen from a Clyde player. I've seen players like Ian Spittle that I would not have particularly thought would have been a great player. Absolute, dyed in the wool Clyde legend. Just somebody that played with so much heart and determination. But I've also got to see Brian Ahern, who a lot of people will tell you is the best Clyde player they've seen. Fishy, an absolute legend of a player. And a gentleman too as well. So there's been some highs, there's been some lows. As my dad used to say, it's not supporting the club through thick and thin. With Clyde, it's thin and thinner. But we're not too bad just now, and there's not been too many great managers at Clyde in my time anyway. But I think we're on the verge of having one just now. So that's what I will say. I've gone back to Craig Brown days. Danny Lennon, is a top manager. Ably assisted by Mr. Moore as well. So I'm still very, very positive for this season and moving forwards. But the Celtic game's the obvious one, and that's probably the highlight as well. In the fact that it was 2 going on 5, so it wasn't a lucky one. It was fully warranted. It was fully justified, and we'll just forget about what happened in the next round.
Yeah, absolutely. Now we do have David MacPherson just currently waiting in the background. Just before we go on, Boise, you wanted to just quickly call out one wee announcement, I believe.
Yeah, a couple of things from the website this week, Paul. So the online shop has a few last-minute Christmas gifts. Ordering as soon as possible, obviously, because we're just around the corner from Christmas. You can get scarves, hats and snoods and many more things, including the playoff win book, which I've got, and it's fantastic. I think any Clyde fan should own it. So certainly go on and have a wee look at all the information there. We've also got information on the festive raffle, which is a big thing each year for Clyde fans. Raises a lot of money. So the closing date for that is the 22nd of December for purchases online, and the 23rd of December for your physical paper tickets and money. The draw for both of them is on Boxing Day, and some of the gifts you can win is a digital edition PS5, a Citizen dining voucher worth £75. It's a good restaurant, that. And one of the wee fun ones I've picked out is a themed escape room reality for 4. So that could be a fun one. I've done that. It's good. So yeah, you want to announce David MacPherson, Paul?
Yeah, brilliant. So hopefully the technology won't fail us. And here he is. David, thank you very much for joining. How are you doing?
Yeah, not bad at all. How are you guys?
Yeah, good. We're just right in the world post-Falkirk match and catching up with Graham. Now, I'll just
Graham, we're almost on the cusp of a great manager. Come on, we've got one already. More positivity.
So, I briefly mentioned earlier, David, obviously you are the medical director of Clyde. You are also a lifelong Clyde fan, so we should obviously call that out too. And we will obviously cover some of your favourite memories of your time supporting Clyde. But just first of all, could you give those listening Clyde fans and others just a kind of overview of your role at the club as medical director?
Sure. Obviously, the club's got a medical team, which includes physio, obviously looking after the players' welfare. We've got a couple of doctors as part of that team. Obviously, I come in as a club dentist at the lower end of that. But as you'll hear later, we've had a lot of players on my chair over the years, which is sitting there just to make sure it's authentic. We've also this season we've just started with sports science, and I think that's really for a professional club you really have to be looking at using every advantage. So we've brought in a absolute top of the range GPS system, and obviously we need somebody to run that. So we're delighted to have our sports scientist who's showing us the ropes, and I think it's a great motivator for the players as well. So really, from I'm kind of oversee the whole medical side of the club, and obviously the big thing just now is COVID. And not only do I have the role of medical director, but I have the role of COVID officer, which really could be a full-time job, especially with how the club's been in the last few weeks. So that's obviously, from before we started training, educating the players, talking to them about what it meant, because in reality, we're asking professional footballers to breach the national government rules. They're given special discompensation from actually doing what everybody else has to do. They don't have to social distance. They're on a pitch. They're getting physical. They're getting within 2 meters, obviously. So we have to talk about what that means off the park, the responsibility at home. I think people don't always realise that players and I mean players of all clubs and at all levels, they have family units. And I know, speaking to some of the guys at the SFA, they're fed up talking about bubbles. Even professional clubs that are tested 2 or 3 times a week, their bubbles are breached by family members who maybe go to work. So you cannot isolate yourself from the rest of the world unless you're locked up in a hotel and the only people you come into contact with is the rest of your teammates. So obviously, with our club being part-time, the players are going to work. They're mixing, outside. So we really have to stress that, in a sense, they become a higher risk because they're breaching those guidelines. So they have to have that risk to their own families, and some of them may have high-risk family members. So they have to, realise the implications of that. And obviously, they have to have some thought as to bringing things into the club and obviously being responsible out with. We know about the headlines of some other clubs that have, been to pubs and partying, and some of the celebrities down in London having birthday parties and things. So, it's the responsibility goes both ways. So I think it's the COVID part's been massive. The medical part will still be here long after COVID's gone. And I think it's been a really good opportunity to professionalise the club in that way.
No, it really does interest me, because as a fan, all we hear is COVID and that's it. And we try our best to try and think, well, what does that actually mean for the day-to-day running of a football club, part-time or full-time? Now, something you touched upon, David, there that I think is quite a pertinent point is that we are part-time. So our players have full-time jobs. So we are in a position that is less favourable than a full-time team, I would say. They can far self-isolate and stay away from the external dangers than obviously a part-time player who's going out 9 to 5 Monday to Friday.
The first time I sat down with the squad, after Danny had sort of got most of the squad together over the summer, and the first time I sat down with them all and we talked about that, we'd done a good number of meetings, a really open discussion with everybody. We had to be frank and honest about that. Of course, there are risks, and they are much higher because we've got a lot of players that work with the public. We've got a player that works in a bank, for example. You can't. I said to the players right at the beginning, you cannot remove the risk. You can reduce the risk, and the protocols that we have in place are designed to reduce the risk, but you can't get rid of it. And as we've seen, it just takes one player coming into the club that's positive, that doesn't know, and there's always a risk of spreading it. Fortunately, my background is that I had to set up a practice COVID policy so that we could, I've got an employer's liability to my staff, so I had to make sure they were safe. And, I guess I was the obvious candidate to do it at the football club, because we had to start and create a protocol in a similar fashion. And all of that's been written. I wrote a operational plan, and hopefully the listeners will be pleased to know that does include the return of supporters. So it started as the basics was just, return to training. That was a challenge in itself, and be able to train safely, and then have friendlies safely, and then actually return to competitive matches safely with officials. And then obviously we've got the skeleton of the framework for a return for supporters, and we do hope, if in Scotland we can get that down to tier 1. At the moment we would be allowed 300 fans, but we have to get down to tier 1, and obviously we're a long way from that just now.
Yeah, very much sadly so. So if we roll back to, say, March time, obviously when the season was curtailed, how evident was it for you, those running the club, that was pretty much it for that season? Was it fairly obvious that there wasn't going to be any football for the foreseeable, or was there still hope that we could get back up and running at that time?
I think at the time, there was very much mixed opinion, and that reflected your knowledge medically and endemically. I was probably the most pessimistic, and I didn't think for a second would be going back. I thought that was it. But there were other people involved in the club that thought maybe we can get back before the end of the season. And certainly, even over the summer, there was quite a lot of optimism about, when you're trying to budget, when you're trying to work out how much of a player pool you have to give to Danny to get a squad together. Trying to budget, not knowing if there's going to be supporters there or not, is obviously a very, very difficult task. And I don't wish to be in the shoes of those that are having to crunch the numbers. And obviously I'm privy to them, but it's a really tough job. So there was some people that thought, okay, well, we've had our first spike and things will get better now. Every pandemic in history has had a second spike, and we might be heading for a third spike after Christmas. So most people I speak to think it will finish or wind down in the summer next year. So I think realistically, my view would be that we're really trying to finish this season, and then hopefully next season is a more of a return. But we just have to keep our fingers crossed.
I'll open it up, gents. Do you have any quick questions that you want to fire?
Yeah, I was just going to say it's a good insight to the football club. David, I've got a background in the COVID stuff as well, so it's good to hear that from the club perspective. Just get a wee question about the facilities at Broadwood. So obviously we've got the cashless points and a fully contactless stadium with the extra capacity as well. Do you think that will be advantageous for Clyde over the other clubs, or do you think that the protocols, all the clubs will come back at the same time, or will we have more fans be allowed back? Or
I think very much we're in probably one of the best positions in the league. When you look at the facilities of some of the other clubs, they just don't have the space to be socially distant. It's been hard enough just trying to separate two teams and match officials. We've got red zones for the staff and players. We've got amber zones for those lucky enough to be there, whether that's scouts or directors or whoever it is. We've got green zone, which is kind of outside the stadium. So to actually, every stadium is specific and different. And I think Broadwood is a fabulous facility. We had a 4-team tournament in the summer, and we managed to do it safely. And when you can actually have 4 teams and officials in a stadium, all separate, all secure, not mixing off the pitch, it shows that you can do a match with 2 teams and officials. So way back, I gave an interview in September with the chairman of Stenhousemuir, I believe it's on YouTube, and both of us talked about our enthusiasm to get fans back. The Broadwood was inspected. They looked at our operational plan for the safe return for supporters. Everything was approved. We've got those facilities to do it. The stadium can actually hold a lot more people than you think. You know, we're 8,800 capacity, you know, approximately. And it's not a question of sitting people in single spaces with 2 meters between them. You know, if people come as a bubble, you know, so if father and son or, you know, a family of 4 come together, they can sit together. So actually, when you start adding multiples of 4, 3, 2, the occasional 1, you know, Billy No Mates, you know, sitting in his own, most people come.
Thank you, Moonshoe Boise.
You know, we've actually, you know, with NLL, the guys at Broadwood have been fantastic. They've looked at the operational plan for the stadium, and they've actually done the maths, crunched the numbers. The Sports Grounds Safety Authority created a sort of green book of, you know, the safety for returning to stadia. The problem isn't so much the seating of fans; it's the ingress and egress of fans. It's the coming out. It's, you know, probably we could get rid of catering. You know, you can get rid of the burger van, you can get rid of that, and just say, right, it's off just now. But folks still need toilet facilities, for example, and that's where the problems lie. Is that you've got minimal facilities, and therefore, how do you get people in safely, get them out safely, and allow people to use facilities that obviously they need to use? You know, those are the big headaches. But I think we could, you know, if the Scottish Government tier level drops, I don't think we'd have any problem starting off at a 300 level. The way it's set up just now, every club would be 300. Nobody's got, you know, Celtic, Rangers are the same, you know, much bigger stadium, but they'd still be down to the 300 mark until there's a change in the rules. So, you know, the fact that Broadwood is more capable, you know, is a great thing. And I have suggested that we're used as a test site. I know Ross County was used, Aberdeen's been used. You know, I'm all for Broadwood being used, and I think we could show that we could do it safely. We have a COVID meeting every week. You know, we sit down, some of us on the hill, some of us socially distant, and we discuss these things. The G4S have been a brilliant support. They do our, you know, they help us on match day. You know, we've got to take temperatures, we've got to do medical checks, we've got, you know, hand hygiene, we've got a whole bunch of, you know, they're not security issues so much, but they're safety issues, and they've been a real help to us. And, you know, they have eyes and ears, for example, at Murrayfield when the rugby returned, which wasn't based at 300, it was a much bigger event. And so we're learning from these other events. So we're getting a lot of information from other people. So I think we're pretty well placed. You know, the minute we can, we'll be there, and hopefully we'll be first in the queue. Whereas I don't think every other club, necessarily our level or below, would be able to do that quite so easily.
Yeah, that's good to hear. I mean, logistically, it does seem like we've got a good plan in place. I know Craig Black a few weeks ago had talked us through what his kind of pre-match thing was, and it did seem to be, you know, really good. Graham, just before we come to yourself, there's a few comments that I just wanted to give to David. So Rory Holmes is asking, how does it work for longer away trips like tomorrow? Do all players have to travel individually? And after that, Craig Black asks, how crucial has the announcement of the government's financial grants been to the survival of our club?
Okay, first question, even for training, we try not to, you know, the rules are that people travel independently. And it's only, you know, at the beginning, there was, you know, a latitude if you were really stuck. The guidance was that you could wear masks together and, you know, you would put your PPE on and travel. But really, we've tried to stress to players that they have to travel independently. And every match we've played so far, the players have travelled independently. Tomorrow is the first time that we are using a bus. So, you know, this is a learning curve. Every time that there's something new, It's a learning curve for us all. We've got the biggest bus that we can, and the players have a seating plan. They're socially distant. Sadly, they're going to have to sit on the bus for 3 hours with masks on. That's just the way it is. Those are the rules. That will be policed, and obviously, if there was a positive case developed early next week, we would be able to say, well, the person sitting in front of, behind, would know the geographics. So you'd know that if it was at the front of the bus, the people middle and back would be less likely. So these are the things we have to build in. It's not just a question of there's the bus and everybody sits apart from each other. There has to be a plan put in place, an actual seating plan, so that you can forensically go back and look at that information to risk assess. That's what we've had to do as a club. The very first time we had a COVID positive player, there was nobody else caught COVID, but we had to go through all the procedures, all the risk assessments, look at all the contacts. When Scottish Government asked me, was there any significant contact during, a trial match? How do you answer that question? What defines a significant contact? So you have to, look at video footage. I had to look at the Montrose game and look at the goal celebrations. 3 goals and winning. So I had 4. It was a good problem to have to look at 4 bits of footage to see if anybody, cuddled somebody too much. But realistically, you have to look at, meetings before the match, changing rooms, all those points where there's closer contact. And obviously, our operational plan is that everybody's socially distant. They wear their masks, and the boys have been fantastic at wearing their masks and doing that. But like human nature, we all need reminded. And Murray's brilliant at shouting at them and telling them to sit apart and do all that kind of stuff. So, we've got our characters, as in the squad, and they're pretty good at self-policing it. So the second question from Mr. Black, as I said a moment ago, the finances are really hard because it's a guesstimate. If we get fans back in a month's time, then obviously there'll be more income. So, the directors of the club are tasked with keeping, being competitive as we can be, but keeping the club safe. So, will the money from Scottish Government save the club? No, because the club's safe anyway. We've done it in a structure that even if there's no extra income coming in, we'll get to the end of the season and we'll be fine. That doesn't mean to say that we don't have to fundraise. It doesn't mean to say we've got targets and tasks, and that's what everybody, all the supporters groups and everybody that helps out in these things. The Christmas raffle that you mentioned, buying the things online, all of that counts. And obviously everything's got a target next to it. So we've got targets. Some will exceed, some will not, and hopefully over the course we'll all average out. What the Scottish Government funds do is obviously make that much more comfortable, but of course that's every club. Clyde are not the worst club out there. There's some clubs in the Championship that are struggling to find money to pay wages this month, next month. So my sympathy goes out to all clubs. Obviously my passion is Clyde, and I can't take any credit for it. The guys that are doing the numbers and know the accounting have done a fabulous job of making sure that no matter what, we'll be okay. But obviously, having that extra money is just a massive comfort. But the details of that haven't been announced yet. So again, to be prudent as directors, you can't assume. Until you've got it in the bank account, you don't have it. So that's our attitude. We've obviously got next season. Already we're talking about next season and planning ahead, and budget meetings are happening already. Discussions about what we can afford for this, that, and the other. From my domain of medical, to other domains. So, the long answer, but the short answer is, the board of directors are looking after the finance, and any extra income is obviously a massive bonus.
Look at that, lads. We're going to get back to the stadiums and we're financially fine. Graham, you get any thoughts?
He's stunned into silence.
That's it.
Yeah, we've lost Graham, I think.
We could do charades, Graham. Just do hand signals. Don't do the 2-finger one. That wouldn't be good.
Well, until Graham gets his audio, we've got one question from Dean. So, is there any indication of when the SPFL will make a decision on when the games are to be rescheduled for, or if they go down another route, which we maybe won't mention? That's too negative.
You know, we don't have an answer to that just now. We don't know. The standard procedure for any game that's not played is that they'll look at why it wasn't played. So, for example, earlier this season, the game against Dumbarton wasn't played because their pitch wasn't playable. You know, why was the pitch not playable? And they'll look at that. And obviously, if there's a point that they feel there's a criticism of the club, they'll bear that in mind with their decision as to whether the game's replayed. The league cup competition that we were involved in at the start of the season, they made the rules perfectly clear. They made the rules that if you couldn't complete the match, then you would lose, and it would be 3-0 loss. That was not stated for the league, and therefore there's that dubiety and question mark about what actually happens. Obviously, from my point of view, I hope very much that we get to replay both matches. I think that would be fair. I think that would be sporting integrity. We tried our best to try and play the match. That's what the SPFL asked us to do. So we signed a couple of trialists. We got a 51-year-old off the bench and got him on terms. We brought back a goalkeeper from a loan at another club. So that was 4 extra individuals, but it didn't allow us to have the numbers to compete in the fixture because of the COVID positive players and other players that were in isolation. And those decisions were made putting the players' health first. You know, I'm a Clyde supporter, but I'm also the medical director, and my responsibility, much as I'd love the game to have gone ahead, is the safety of the players. The first match that we couldn't play against East Fife was probably the easier of the two because, you know, it happened and we had to react. The second match, you know, we obviously had longer to try and put a team together to play. But, you know, I'm not sure that sporting integrity, is respected if we end up signing a bunch of players that are not Clyde players just to play a single match. We did talk to other players that weren't signed or affiliated with another club, but most of them said they weren't fit enough to put on a jersey and play at a first division level. And I totally understand that. So we did try, but in the end we couldn't fulfill that fixture. And I do hope that when it's looked at, and I don't know when that will be, they look upon it, you know, favourably, because as I say, I think in a worldwide pandemic, you know, in tier 3, which was the highest tier, it was no fault of any player, you know, catching it and bringing it in, and it was localized. The outbreak of the club was in the small, you know, the players are in separate dressing rooms, and it was the players that were directly in contact in that dressing room that ended up getting ill. So it didn't spread to the rest of the squad. It didn't spread to other players, but we'd still had to risk assess. I would have been massively criticised if I'd not isolated anybody, and then a week later we had another 5 or 6 players that fell ill. But that didn't happen. So, you know, you have to make a judgment call. You look at the evidence. I looked at the video footage. I looked at who was sitting next to who, in what rooms, at what times. There was no issue with not wearing masks or anything like that. So, you know, criticism of anybody is minimal. And the joint response group have spoken to me at length. The Scottish Government have spoken to me at length. John McLean at Hampden has spoken to me at length. We've gone through all of the details. They then pass it on, all that information, and I haven't heard anything about, you know, SPFL speaking to me or how that will be dealt with. But I do hope that will get to replay the matches. I think that would be the fairest thing.
Yeah,
listen,
completely agree there.
As a fan, I've got to say, I think the club have dealt with it really well. We've come out with some strong statements, and I feel like the statements have substance to them. We've got the logistical planning, as you've said. We've got our kind of match day routine, and for me, I think we've done everything right. So yeah, I think well done on that.
The players don't. People don't realise this. The players don't even come in the main stand now. We come in a separate entrance. We don't actually, you asked me a question about Broadwood and was it a good stadium and a favourable stadium for the fans coming back? Absolutely, but it's a municipal stadium. We're not the only people that play there. We've had a Champions League match there this week, which is fabulous. But there's also another team in Cumbernauld that play there. So that's two teams alone. With us, that's three teams plus all the youth teams that play, etc., etc. So when you've got a stadium that's used as much as Broadwood is, it makes the biosecurity of it much, much harder. So although we've got a better and safer stadium for fans return, we've got a logistical difficulty in terms of separating different groups. So, for example, before we play a match or we have training, there may be people on the pitch or using the facility before us. And obviously, the way to separate people for safety is by distance or by time. Those are the two main ways of doing it. So we either separate them physically or we separate them by time. Now, obviously, the players have to be in the stadium, prepped, do their physio stuff if they need to do that, get their medical attention. So they can't, they can't do the time separation. So what we've done is we've created a physical barrier. So we don't come in the main stand. The only time the players go into the home dressing room is 5 minutes before the game starts and at half time. They don't even go back in there after the game. That's the protocol we have. So it just shows you the level of detail that we've gone to create that safety.
Yeah, it probably brings me quite nicely then onto the kind of final point, just very wary of the time, David. It's really just now looking at what are the challenges ahead with obviously the ongoing COVID issues and what kind of remains of the season. What do you see the key challenges being for the club over the next, say, 5-6 months?
I think the challenges are like every season. Last night in training, we got an injury of a player, quite a key player. So that's always a challenge. Injuries are always an issue. But I think with COVID, that's another player down, and obviously your squad can be stretched by either people getting COVID or having to isolate. So we need every healthy body we can get. So I think bodies is a big part. Other challenges will obviously be, with Christmas and the expected spike that everybody's talking about. Will we go into a national third, lockdown situation? And they've always had, as I said, there's always been a second wave. Is there going to be a third wave? This is unprecedented. I know that's a word that's overused at the moment, but it really is, and we don't know. I'm lucky enough that I've received the vaccine this week because of my job. I'm looking down the throat of people with their masks off. So there's not many jobs that are much more kind of in the coalface. When we looked at the red zone, for example, the club doctor couldn't answer the questionnaire that he hadn't been in contact with a COVID positive patient because he's working in a hospital, and therefore we actually couldn't let him enter the red zone. That is the difficulty in some of the lines of actually saying our club doctor might be a risk to our players. It's all theoretical, real, and when you look at that, you think that's mad. How do you operate? But how do you find a doctor that's not had any contact with potentially a COVID positive patient? I've had COVID positive patients at the practice because of the protocols we have and the PPE that we wear. We've not had, touch wood, an outbreak so far. None of my staff have it's been passed on from a patient yet, but that potential. So we've had our outbreak. It's not the first time we've had a COVID positive player. When we did have that outbreak after the Montrose game, it was contained. Everybody, thankfully, is well. I've spoken to all the players. I keep in touch with them all regularly. They're all fit and well and healthy and ready to go. So, that's great news. So I think the biggest challenge has probably been keeping everybody safe, fit, well. And obviously the Scottish Government support is a massive boost into finances. So I think that allows us to, start thinking more confidently about next season. And, you start thinking about, I spoke to one of our players that left us in the summer. And he said himself, I speak to a lot of the players as patients, which is a real bonus, because you get to speak to them not as football players, but just as people. And he said himself, who would sign him? Who would give him a contract just now with the uncertainty and everything else? And that's a player that's playing at a higher league than us now. So if you do your sums, you could probably work out who I'm talking about. But as most of the guys are, great squad of guys, absolutely brilliant, great squad. It's not just guys; we've got some females and staff as well, but just a really good bunch of people. And it's hard times, It's hard for all clubs, and I think that's what sometimes fans don't realise. It's not just us; it's all clubs that are in the same situation. But we're doing our best.
No, absolutely, and you should all be commended for it. To run a football club in these conditions must just be absolutely. I don't know how you sleep at night, to be honest. At times, David. So just very.
I've been on the phone to at midnight. They'll still testify to that. It's it's brutal. But that's the thing. You have to just react to what happens, and every day is different. The week of the after the Montrose game, every hour you were getting an update and news, and that's somebody's going for testing and this, that, and that. It's really tough. You just got to react to it. So no, thanks.
And just very, very briefly then, do you just have a final message for the Clyde fans, just for going forward?
Absolutely.
Obviously, a good, or a player level. Not at all. I've got some toothache, so that chair's going to get filled very soon.
I'll look after you, don't you worry. From my point of view, keep supporting the club, everybody. The club is its supporters, the club is its fans. So just
not at all.
We're all in it together. So let's get back to going to the football, but we've got to do it safely. We've got to look after each other. So that's all I would say. Have a great Christmas.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, David. Really do appreciate it. And it's been a fascinating insight, obviously, to the club and COVID and all the trials and tribulations that we've faced. Graham, thank you very much for your time also. It's been a pleasure having you on.
Thank you.
Boise, thank you, as always, for being my right-hand man on a Friday evening. This will be our last podcast pre-Christmas. I decided we wouldn't ruin your Christmas dinner by having a look at these faces next Friday. So we will see you post-Christmas. We hope you all have a fantastic time, however you're celebrating it. And hopefully when we come back, we'll have maybe 6 points to talk about. So until then, stay safe,